Hello everybody, Floppy Waffle 69 here, and for today's viewing entertainment, we are looking at the crown jewel of the Down the Line series, going down to the USS Montana. This is the Tier 10 USS Montana. Now, obviously, there's an argument to be made when I say the crown jewel. You could say, well, Waffle, what about the main? Well, yeah, if you really want to incorporate super ships, I'm nuts. I'm one of those players that I have them just for the reward or anniversary events where you can like milk steel or whatever out of them. But other than that, I really don't dabble in super ships because I just find the way they're implemented into random battles and into the game not very good. I don't think they're particularly healthy. But then again, there are plenty of cancer ships in this game. But I kind of wish they would be implemented a little bit differently. Going on that topic, maybe, I don't know, like a super ship battle mode, which would be super sick. 12v12 super ships versus super ships. I think that'd be an awesome game mode, but whatever. We're not talking about super ships. We are talking about the USS Montana, and we are back in the New York port. I had a comment about how the New York port is kind of loud with the horns and whatnot, so I apologize for that, but I wanted to make, match the ship's nations to its corresponding port. Yeah, I could have done Hawaii, but, I don't know. I feel like New York is a little bit more nostalgic with the Brooklyn Bridge in the background. So anyways, the USS Montana, how is she? What is she? How do you play her? Is she any good? The short answer to all this is yes. I find the USS Montana a very capable battleship, even in 2025, where more and more ships have just been added into the game. Obviously, if you look at the server statistics, she and the Yamato are both at the bottom of the win rate categories, but also at the top of the popularity scale. So is that very accurate? Probably not, because when they have almost quadruple or even more than that battles played than any other battleships, you're going to provide a little bit inflated statistics based on skill level playing the ship. Obviously, being here on the North American server, I can tell you right now, the American battleships in a whole, and especially the Montana line, because the Iowa exists, extremely popular. So you're getting all sorts of skill levels playing this particular battleship and this battleship line. But we have a lot to cover in today's video, probably more so than not. I'm going to try to correct some things that I've done wrong in previous guides and videos. And one thing is talking about the legendary mod. I know I didn't do that on my Zhao, though I recommended the way to play the Zhao is with the legendary mod, and that's how I do it. I will definitely touch on the pros and cons to utilizing the legendary mod, and obviously whether or not it's worth your time, because now when I got the Montana's legendary mod, I believe they were mission chains back in the day, and they've since been migrated and moved over to the research bureau for your hard-earned research bureau points. So again, I'll debate whether or not it's particularly worth it or whatnot. So again, it is all a debate. It's all an opinion. Just because I say something doesn't mean it's the end-all be-all right way. Obviously, I don't have that much of a following, and no one knows me like other YouTubers. So obviously, go look around, shop around, hear everyone's opinion on it, and then you make the decision that's best for you. So just my opinion. But like we always do, we're going to dig under the hood, talk about some soft stats, and then I'll show you some gameplay of her. But before we do that, just before we do that, the first thing I want to say about the Montana and my experience with playing her. It's a little bit of a love-hate experience, because I find the USS Montana to be great. Well, not great. To be solid in the majority of situations in this game. I find if you're playing the Montana, just like why you would play other ships, like the Gearing, for example, it's actually a great example, is they're kind of like the Swiss Army knife on the battlefield. They're kind of they're pretty average at everything. Oh, sorry, they're pretty good at everything, but also at the same time being kind of poor at everything. They're just kind of your average, jack of all trades sort of ships. And again, some of the words I'm using there aren't really accurate because I wouldn't really call it average or whatever. But basically what I'm trying to say is the USS Montana is just a solid BB. You don't need any gimmicks. There's no, improved accuracy when you do this, or you pop this button or your F key or anything like that. This is just a all-around, just solid performing battleship that comes down to a couple of things that'll obviously increase your, percentage of likelihood of doing better in her and your battle performance, but as well as skill level fluctuates with her. But there's a couple things that can help with that, which either be an Achilles heel or can be a very big plus to you when you play this ship. First and foremost is, well, I don't want to get into it because I don't want to start reading statistics. We'll just go through the stats and we will talk about them, and I'll make sure I highlight the good and the bad for you guys. So first thing we do is we're going to look at the armor layout, which is not bad. You are a little bit better armored, obviously, thank God, for tier 10 when it comes like to the Iowa. So you have 32 millimeter nose, 32 millimeter ass. Again, this is overmatchable by 460s plus. And you get this 38 millimeter deck as well with a side belt or armor belt of 409 millimeters. So very thick on that regard. With the when you're looking at her, she does have a waterline citadel, as you can see here. Make sure I can get rid of those ships on the bottom. Waterline citadel, again, to me, I've talked about this with the Iowa and the NC. I don't really find it particularly hard to citadel these top tier American BBs, especially on this line. It's just if they are showing any amounts of broadside, aim waterline, and I think you'll get the citadel ribbons that you're looking for, especially when you're shooting on this ship with battle cruisers or battleships. I kind of, a little bit of a side rant here. I kind of wish a lot more other battleships would be built in this regard, that having actually hit-able citadels. I feel like we've had this kind of influx of battleships that can absolutely smash other ships, but in return get away with bloody murder half the time. Prime example that I'm thinking of is like the Bungo or the Libertad. Like, yes, you can citadel them and they will happen occasionally, but it is very rare. You know what I mean? And it's sad to see that. They can punish you, but in return you can't really punish them. So, but whatever. We're not here talking about that. We're talking about the Montana. So again, the armor scheme, not terrible. Nothing special to write home about. It is waterline citadel, so you have that working for you in your favor to some degree. Again, though, when you're turning hard to port or stern, turning in, it will list you out of the water, therefore exposing your citadel above water, which is making it a little bit easier to get those citadel ribbons, especially with plunging fire. So survivability clocking in for the Montana is coming in at 96,300, and that is a lot coming from the Iowa, which is a 79,000 exactly. You're going to see this. This is nothing new. The tier 10 jump is quite substantial when it comes to HP, DPM, all that kind of stuff. Again, it is one of the harder tiers, going from tier 9 to tier 10, though I don't think it's the hardest jump in the game. But it is nice for you guys that we have access to some pretty damn good, hit points, basically. I think the Yamato's coming in at like 97,000, so you're right there. I think the most is the Kremlin with 108,000. Grosser Kurfürst is like 105 or something like that. So you're right there with all those ships, though you're not breaking 100K. Torpedo belt is clocking in at the 37%. And when you look at that, that's not bad, given that the leaders are the Shikushima and Yamato with the 55 torpedo protection, and bringing up the rear is the incomparable Mecklenburg. Incomp has 14%, and the Mecklenburg has the 20%. So 37 is kind of like right in there in the middle of the pack. Not too bad, not too bad. Again, though, that will play quite a role when I talk about the maneuverability of this ship, because the maneuverability is not the best. Okay, coming into the artillery, and I'll go ahead and throw up the gun firing angles. I realized I didn't do it with the Iowa. The Iowa, though I talked about it, was actually not that bad. Montana is kind of similar boat, though when it comes to putting on that fourth turret on your on target, you are exposing your broadside, and you will absolutely get smashed and punished for it. I know there used to be this debate back early in the game, or early in the day, about the Iowa being theoretically better than the Montana. And I guess the whole argument started with, well, 2/3 of your firepower is concentrated up front in the Iowa, so you're less inclined to rotate around and get your third turret on the target, whereas the Montana, a lot of Montana drivers, they have access now to this heavy-ass broadside. They're going to go and shoot all their guns all the time, and they're going to get absolutely punished for it. So I guess I can see the argument to be made, and also this thing's a lot more detectable than the Iowa. So again, I get it. I do think the Montana is still the superior battleship if she's played right, clearly. But that is where the original argument came from. But enough about that. Let's talk about the main battery here for you guys. The main battery is clocking in at the 30 seconds reload, and that is base because we are taking the artillery plotting room 2, like I told you. So please slot the artillery plotting room 2. You get that minus 11% dispersion, which is huge, and it's also a bonus because you can't slot the minus 7 aiming systems mod in the 3rd slot. So why would you not take this? Every battleship player wants to be more accurate, right? But yeah, with the USS Montana and her main battery, you do have those 4 times 3, 406 millimeter guns. 180-degree turn time is 39 seconds. And then if we look at her max range, which is clocking in at 23.7, we are looking at a value for her dispersion at 290 meters horizontally and 172 meters vertically with a sigma value of 1.9. With her AP going down that range, again, you have normal fuse times of 0.033. But again, coming out of the barrel with 7.62, this is exactly identical to the Iowa. And the impact angle at that max range is coming in at 22.2 degrees. These shells, like we've kind of seen, not as extreme as we are in North Carolina, but you saw with the Iowa, which is a little bit better. They are on the floatier side, so you're going to have to lead correspondingly to that and make sure you factor that in when you are trying to pinpoint your lead times. Because these shells do like to hang just a little bit more than other nations. So, and her max damage on her AP is 13,500 Citadel max damage on the shells. Just to touch base a little bit on the HE shells, there are times you're going to have to shoot HE. Again, I will try to highlight those if those happen in the replays. If not, just think of like your Bowin Yamatos, things like that. Like you're gonna have to do it. DDs, for example, I know my buddy absolutely railed Kavaros the other day with HE, who was not expecting HE to be shot by my buddy's Montana from about 10 kilometers and nuked him for about 10K. The HE is potent, though it's not obviously Conqueror levels and stuff like that. But you do have 12 406 millimeter HE shells flying down range. So with that HE, you're coming out of max damage of 5,700, and with the fire chance of 36% and penetrating 68 millimeters of effective armor. The fires per minute is 8.6, whereas the Iowa only came in or clocked in as a 6.5 fires per minute. Interesting, right? Again, that's just going to be directly related to the additional turret that you're getting on the ship. You're having 4 instead of 3. A defenses. All right. Finally, again, we've talked about this since the NC. Your ship has the capability to shoot down planes, though how much or how many planes you're going to be shooting down is very, very hit or miss depending on the skill of the CV, if they're flying through flak, etc. Don't rely on it because it's certainly not what it used to be. But again, you'll be able to shoot down a couple planes before they make the inevitable strike, and when they fly around, you'll be able to shoot down more. Granted, it depends on the CVs you're fighting and whatnot. At least you're going to be able to minimize the attacking squadron, which is good, and minimize the amount of damage potentially. But again, I wouldn't really pride ourselves on being an AA-focused battleship, though Wargaming wants you to believe that. It's not really true, so don't really listen to that. Again, you're coming in with 8 flak, I believe. And that is, with certain upgrades and captain skills as well. So factor that in too. So, all right. Going on to the maneuverability, and this is something that we are going to talk about just a little bit longer than normal. With your main speed clocking in, I believe 30 knots exactly. And then your turning circle radius is 950 meters, which is not base. That is with the upgrade, right? No. Did I not slot the upgrade? Maybe I didn't slot the upgrade. My mistake there. And the rudder shift time. Okay, that's what it is. My bad. I was talking about rudder shift. So yes, turning circle radius is 950 meters, and the rudder shift time of 17.8 with that is not normal. It's supposed to be 22.2 seconds. So I take the rudder shift mod in the slot. What, 3 is that? Now, why do I do that? I know a lot of commanders are going to recommend you take the damage control systems. The reason why I'm not taking that is because the Montana has the single worst rudder shift of all battleships at tier 10. Why that is, I don't know. I think that it's really, really stupid, especially now. I don't know. Like, it's not like it's dominating the competition. And for example, a Montana class battleship, the USS Iowa, which is the research bureau ship, has a rudder shift time of 18.6. So why is it substantially better? Personally, I would like to see the Ohio and the Montana have the same rudder shift time at 18.6. I think the Montana needs a buffer in that regard. I think this is outdated. I think this is stupid. There are other battleships that are arguably better in some most regards that are going to be able to turn quicker, and I think that's just flat out ridiculous. So I'd love to see that. And that's where that torpedo protection of 37% comes in, because it's like, well, you have a massive rudder shift. So you're going to have to, factor in that you're most likely going to eat a peat or two just because of that. So you're going to have to plan accordingly and position yourself knowing where enemy destroyers are. But a little rant over on that, because it's not the only thing I would like to see changed on the Montana. Okay? The concealment. Base detect on the Montana is clocking in at 17.3 essentially. 17.2, 17.3. I obviously take the concealment mod in the 5th slot, which is bringing us down to 15.6. And then if we take the captain skill, it is going to go ahead and take us down to 14 kilometers. Okay. 2 arguments here, and they kind of lead back and forth. I think the USS Montana needs a concealment buff. I would like to see her go to 13 point something. I mean, the Vermont has 12.8, which is broken and brain dead. I think that is ridiculous, and I think it has a way harder hitting broadside. And it has 457s, which says FU to cruisers, where the Montana doesn't have that. I would personally like to see the Vermont raised in its detection to the high 13s, even 14s, while the Montana drops just below 14, like 13.8, 13.7. I think it'll help the ship. It's something subtle, and I think it'll help the ship position itself and maybe fall off detect, whereas 14 kilometers seems pretty excessive for a 12-gun, 406mm battleship. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's less of a buff for the Montana and more by asking for a nerf on the Vermont. But these battleships with these massive broadsides that just devastate not only enemy battleships, but especially enemy cruisers, I fucking can't stand. I think it's stupid. It's just really bad game design. But there's a lot of that going on in this game lately, so what are you going to do? But that is one thing I'd like to see change for the Montana. So, obviously I talked about the ship in its whole, and obviously you guys saw the upgrades I'd recommend for the ship. Obviously right here I have Auxiliary Armaments Modification 1. I wouldn't recommend that. That's just because I was doing some AA troll build. I'll switch it to main armaments mod 1. Make sure when I'm doing the replays for you guys so you can see that. Though I don't think you'll be able to tell that realistically, but whatever. But we're going to talk about the reinforced emergency response here in the, what is this, the 5th slot? Which obviously, as you can see here, is going to reduce your fire extinguishing time, flood time, rudder shift time, and steering gears repair time. I mean, do I see this as being a viable playstyle for the Montana? So you're sacrificing even more concealment in order to have kind of more damage mitigation baked into your ship. I mean, the steering gears repair time for me is like, okay, whatever. That's kind of a joke because usually you're not getting that knocked out unless you take a peed in the ass, realistically. But the rudder shift time minus 30% is, I think, the big highlight because that's going to help the Montana. As because she is very not maneuverable, and you can min-max that with the rudder shift you're seeing in the 4th slot. The fire extinguishing time and flood time is minus 10%. That's very small, but it will help. Noticeable, maybe, but whatever. For me, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I don't think the reinforced emergency response is worth it. It is. I just think it's going to be a little bit more of a downside than it is going to be a side grade or upside, just because you're basically factoring in the big highlight here is the rudder shift time. And I mean, for me, it's nice, though I'd like the buff that I talked about previously for the Montana. I just don't think it gives enough to justify doing it over your concealment value. 14 kilometers is already higher, in my opinion, for a battleship. Um, and I'd rather have that at my disposal rather than this. I think I'm well trained enough and know the game that I don't really, I can utilize my damage control party and heals correspondingly and right rather than in certain situations than try to rely on a legendary or nuke upgrade like this. Do you think can you obviously use this? Well, absolutely. Like there's certain builds I think you can use it. But in any competitive element, nah, and I don't think it's really going to add any more of your fun factor to the game either because of it. So personally for me, it's just a no-go. I wouldn't even waste it. I have it. I think I've used it a couple times to see if I liked it or not after I unlocked it, and I think I was like, this is utter garbage. Um, so yeah, I don't like it. I think this is one of the unique upgrades that probably could use a little bit of a tweak to kind of help people decide whether or not they want to use it. So. But that's just my opinion, guys. Again, if you think you're gonna use it a little bit better than I am, or uh, then go ahead and slot it. But that's just my opinion on it, and I'll talk about it again while we're in game. So, but yeah. So yeah, this is the USS Montana in port, and hopefully I talked enough about her. So some final thoughts before we go into battle with her. Capable battleship, 100% capable battleship. The fact that people say the ship really has no armor or the ship isn't really viable in 2025, I kind of laugh at. I think it's a standard, solid battleship that no matter the situation that it presents itself, I think it can do relatively good work in that situation. Obviously, the two things I touched based on that I would like to see change with the USS Montana, I already stated with the concealment and the rudder shift. And I know Lesta made the rudder shift change, which thank God, they at least understand a little bit more. But yeah, those are the two things realistically. Other than that, though, there's no point in sitting here and dwelling on things that may or may not be changed. I say I show you how to, some tips and tricks on how to play her and some good gameplay on her. With how she is now in game. So let's go check that out, guys. All right, guys, and here we are in battle here in the USS Montana. And first things first, I want to give a little bit of a spoiler warning here. We do end up losing this game. My play certainly isn't perfect, but it is close. But I think there's just better decisions made by the enemy compared to our team. So anyways, first things first, what is the most important thing we can do when we load into battle? Well, one is we got to see who we're up against. We're recognizing that there is an enemy super battleship on the enemy team, which is the Patre, and to make sure that we position our ship right. So on this side, if I spawn in on a battleship like the USS Montana, knowing that I have those floaty, cruppy shells that kind of go up and down and hit at a steeper angle, I know that I like to take my ship a little bit wide. Now, why is this? Well, most people would prefer to take a laser beam of a battleship, such as a Kremlin, a Colombo, ships that have just better shell arcs. To me, you have to play around your ship and what it's good at, and this thing is very, very strong at lobbing shells over islands. So I know that a lot of light cruisers or even some heavy cruisers with radar like to position themselves right behind this island at like E2, E3. I know that if I come in around the G line and start swinging out wide, already start a pre-kite in my USS Montana, I know that I can arguably be stronger than hiding behind the island and not tanking any shells, not doing any passive spotting for my sub, nothing, right? Obviously, my DD is making a conscious play to go to the cap and contest, and we have the USS Des Moines going there to support him. As also with our Valparaiso, then shiny new Tier 9 Pan American mutant of a battleship. But no, and we're just going to show some gunnery on display here against this Hindenburg. So as you can see, we kind of came in, we started kiting out, better gun firing angles when we are kited away, and we're going to start pounding the Hindenburg, obviously anticipating the Hindenburg slowing down. And you really can see that kind of floaty shell arcs that the Montana, the Iowa, and also, of course, the North Carolina all have. So we got to play with that in mind and make sure that we lead accordingly. Now, I didn't think the Hindenburg was going to full send it behind. It didn't make much sense. But then again, when regarding on this salvo, he did show me that he's willing to rudder juke and slow down and adjust his speed. So I have that in my mind that he is kind of actively maneuvering in regards of his engine. So I'm going to go ahead and plan accordingly. Also, you see that I was engaging him in my ideal range, but now we are starting to exceed what I would recommend the ideal range is for the USS Montana, which is if you're exceeding 17 kilometers on a target, especially when you're engaging a cruiser, it is not ideal just because of how floaty your shells are and how long they take to get to the target, especially when you're firing the AP. Obviously here, you're seeing that we're landing 4 shells on target. He was, I think, slightly reversing there. So maybe missed 1 or 2 shells because of that. But as you can see, we're landing, consistency of our shells, 30, 40% of our shells on target, which is great. I would say a really, really good salvo in the Montana is if you're landing 50% of your shells or not, which is awesome. Obviously, we're seeing that he is trying to disengage. I fell off detection for a split second. He is going to attempt to get behind this island, and we plan accordingly, we adjust accordingly, put our salvo where it needs to go, and we get him. Awesome. It always feels good. Something about dev strikes with these floatier shells, especially the USS Montana, the Ohio, the Vermont, these kind of floatier battleship shells, they just feel really good. And I really do feel like I obtain more citadels on cruisers because of I don't know what it is, that the way the shells come and hit the angle of the ship and the penetrating angle really does help, especially when you're overmatching cruisers' decks, but really kind of land in under that citadel, that citadel plating and go right in where you're supposed to go on the broadside, which is awesome. Here I am using the spotter plane just in order that I can see over the island a little bit better than doing the double tapping of the M key. Everyone knows that trick by now. If you don't, again, I'm thinking about making a video on some tips and tricks that a lot of people don't seem to touch on. Also, another thing you see me doing is I'm communicating with my team, indicating, hey, I am going to start being a little bit more aggressive with you, Hanover. You're going to have me as a support. But I also have to keep in mind, there is a Shimakaze, because I counted 3 racks of 5 out here on this flank. So making sure that I know where he's at, also with that Balau being able to screen not only for torps, but potentially ships for me, allows me to play in this somewhat decently aggressive play style. But I don't want to be too aggressive. As you see, we have a Poison, a Patre, and a Stalingrad, with the addition of a submarine who is inevitably out here as well, because we saw the pings. So probably not a good flank to be aggressive on. We have a Zell that is slightly behind me. I wish he was up just a little bit more, but I understand as the Poison is closing in and he wants to make sure he can keep his distance. I have a full review on the Zell on my channel as well. Just make sure to go check that one out for you guys if you have any question on how to play that ship well. Again, we're going to come to a complete stop here. I don't want to push up anymore. Obviously, the Shim is opening up with his guns in his smoke screen. See, also disregarding the Poison, knowing that the Poison's going to go down to my team with fire. So anyways, you're going to see me start switching to HE against the Patri. Now, why am I switching to HE against the Patri here, guys? Well, the big thing is that the Patri's armor scheme, I know I can actually full pen him with my HE, which is awesome. But also, the angle he's providing me with his super battleship is not allowing me to get to the best angle. Obviously, that was a poor shot by me because I wasn't anticipating the turnout. So I'm just trying to play around the scenario while switching different ammunition types to play around. If I can get him to burn a damage control party while I have my Des Moines or Valparaiso shooting at him as well, it'd be nice for him to do that, especially with maybe the submarine potentially landing a torpedo too in the mix. Also, the subs passively spotting those torpedoes for me so I can angle in. Knowing where that shim is at all times is really smart, especially in the Montana. Because your rudder shift is so inherently bad, you really have to know where these destroyers are and the potential threats, especially when it comes to torpedoes. So make sure that you plan accordingly and position your ship, obviously to anticipate of torpedoes or whatnot. If you are going to make a full gamer turn, I highly suggest you count the number of racks that have come your way, because if you do not do that, you will get destroyed. With only a 37% torpedo belt reduction with those torpedoes, you're getting in dangerous territories, whether or not how much damage you're going to take. Even if you need to just turn broadside, kind of rip the band-aid off, here to speak, I understand the decision-making process, but it comes down to what ships are shooting at you. I know I do eventually do that. It comes to against the Stalingrad, and it was a good decision by me later on in the video, and you'll see that, and I'll make sure to highlight to you guys as well. Also, with the angle of the Patri, I could obviously chunk him with his massive superstructure on this AP, but again, I opt for the HE again, and I go ahead and get a fire on him, so we're passively taking him down as well, while the Valprazio secondaries are starting to rain. One thing I want to mention about the Montana that I kind of forgot to mention in the port view, I don't know what it is with these ships in particular, but again, with the angle of attack that their AP takes when it lands on the trajectory of ships, it is a very, very good ship to chunk enemy superstructures with. I've noticed this for quite some time, and more often than not, I will stick with the AP rather than switching to the HE just because of that. Maybe you guys will notice that too as well. That could just be a kind of just trust me, bro kind of thing. But I really have noticed that in my USS Montana, especially when you have the volume of shells going down range, which is 12. That being said, on the contrary, the Montana is a pretty damn easy ship to HE spam, with only having the 38mm deck and the decently abundant superstructure on the ship, with fairly sitting taller with the superstructure as well. I don't find a problem when it comes to HE spamming the USS Montana. So that is another thing you have to be wary about. That is just the design of the ship and how it is. So you're gonna have to play around that. Some ships like the Libertad, which doesn't have a whole lot of superstructure to farm, that's gonna be a little bit more tankier. Also, we all know the massive abundance of superstructure on the like the Grosser Kurfürst. So same kind of deal in regards of the USS Montana. So also the Montana finally completing the line with maintaining that 18.5% repair on its 28-second runtime repair party. So it's a little bit improved on that regard. Yeah, super nice. Again, it's going to allow the tankiness of the ship to be a little bit good. And there's this is that point in the time of the video when I told you, like, I made that good turn. Again, why would I continuously push into a Shima and a U4501? That is just certain death. I had to play it smart. And my Zhao, I don't think, is playing as aggressive enough as he shouldn't be. Make that clear. As aggressive enough to order to spot the submarine for me. So I think I'm making a conscious decision here by full game returning, kind of retreating a little bit. My plan here was I was going to go back behind A, go to C, and support the oncoming push that's inevitably coming from the enemy team. Again, here's the rudder shift. Like, I see my gap. I see where I'm going to potentially squeak in there, and I must have just done it a little bit wrong. Didn't hold my rudder just enough, and we end up taking a peed up the ass. Oh well. I mean, I have the HP to spare, but still, it's you don't like taking peeds. And again, that's because that exorbitantly long rudder shift time that goddamn, I wish they would change. I think there's so many of us out in the community that would really appreciate our Montana to turn slightly faster than it is now. I mean, especially when you have things that accelerate through their turn, like the Vermont and the Libertad, which is fucking kind of a joke, but whatever. Balance, I guess, right? Quotation marks. Another thing I forgot to mention on this boat, because it is a sister ship, or it is the lead ship of the class of, like, the Ohio, what is a research bureau ship. You do have secondaries. You do have the 10 times to 127mm secondaries. These are the same guns that you find on the Gearing, for example. You do have a secondary DPM of 180,000. And the hitting DPM, like effective hitting DPM of 27,905 with a range of 7 kilometers, reloading about 6 seconds. They only penetrate 21mm of armor, and they have that 5% fire chance. Personally, I would not spec my Montana for secondaries. I think it's a stupid investment, just because of your fire chance is pretty low. Oh, no, my bad. 9% fire chance. Okay. For a second there, I was like, what the hell? And it has a 7.3 second reload. Sorry, I think I was reading off the Iowa's thing. My bad. So the secondary DPM, so scratch what I just said. The secondary DPM of the Montana is 270,000, and the hitting DPM is 42,348 with a 7.3 kilometer range, reload of 4 seconds, and penetrating 21mm of armor with a 9% fire chance with that fires a minute, which is 27, which is pretty damn nice. Personally, for me, because you only have 7.3, which is kind of gimped range, I believe a full secondary build's only getting out to like 10.3, 10.5, maybe around that range. It really doesn't make sense to me. You don't really want to brawl in your Montana, except unless the situations align and it's toward the end of the game usually, and you can need a tank for your team. I don't really see the point of it. There's no improved dispersion here, nothing that's baked into your ship. It just doesn't make much sense. But on the contrary, like the Ohio that has the 10 times 2 127s as well, with the faster rudder shift, you have the 308,500 secondary DPM with the 79,148 actual hitting DPM, 7.5 kilometer range, 3.5 second reload, with a 9% fire chance with about 30 fires per minute. It's just ultimately a better ship. So I believe the second race might get out to 11 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken, on the Montana, and 11.3 on the Ohio when you're running the flags and whatnot. That's what it is. It just, to me, I don't quite understand why, if the Ohio gets access to the rudder shift just because it's trying to emphasize more of a brawling play style, why the same ship doesn't get access to that as well. A little bit questionable for me in that regard, but Wargaming has their reasons, I'm sure, or they're just that much of a space cadet too. That is physically possible. But yeah, it's something that I would really like to see changed on the Montana. It would allow her to, I think, to be a little bit, a little bit more flexible in the regards of the maneuvering department, which will allow her to potentially dodge torpedoes a little bit better, which would be nice, right? So, but enough babbling on about that, guys. Again, like I said, it's not worth talking about stuff that may or may not never change. But something that I personally think that would be good for the community in a whole is if that was a change that was well received. It would be a change that would be well received by the community, I think, and would ultimately make the USS Montana that much better of a ship. So, but yeah, the Montana overall, especially in this game, I mean, I'm trying to support my team. Obviously, I'm coming back this now. Why did I turn back in A here? And this is kind of the point of decision that I made because I thought this was the right play. I didn't think my Blau was going to go down. I should have known better. But I'm trying to get closer to utilize my ASW to support him. Again, I don't think the right play was sticking on the set flank. I think it would have just been cancer. So I went ahead and sailed into A to try to get my ASW within the range here, and in order to utilize it. And yeah, still we're not able to capitalize on it. I do a couple blind drops, depending like maybe where he might go. And again, it doesn't hurt, especially when you're not detected like this, to just throw out your ASW, especially because a Stalingrad's not going to be in range to shoot him down. And I believe I do get lucky here and get a direct hit on him, which is huge. I think that's actually pretty comical. But this is the mistake I make. I should not have sailed to the left of A. I should have sailed to the right of A and go ahead and tried to engage that submarine head on. My initial thought here was maybe the Claver will be able to sneak into D and catch the Valparaiso off guard, and our Des Moines might play it safe and try to go hug behind an island. Both things do not happen, and we end up losing the game. And of course, I get blamed for my poor positioning as I'm getting told I am too far out of the battle, which is fair. I understand I'm too far out of the battle, but again, you can see where my mind was, working essentially to support my allies in the best. Also, I was wishing that my spotter plane was up so I'd pop it, maybe get a glimpse of the U-4501. Sadly, it never happens, but, whatever. So we're kind of winding down here on the game anyways, which the rest of the game's not too exciting. But, a couple last things I like to talk about with the USS Montana before I run out of time here with the video and the replay. I don't think the Montana is a bad ship at all. Matter of fact, I think it's quite good. I quite like her a lot, and I definitely think the grind is 100% worth it still to the Montana because I do think it teaches you the fundamentals of how to play a battleship. I really do think that. I think there are better battleships, like we've already talked about, but I do think, like all in all, it is a good ship to help teach your improve your overall play style. So, again, battleships in general. But she's a good mix, and I like her. And the best thing I probably like about her is that all she has is baked into the ship. There's no F key here. There's no burst fire mode. There's no consumables. Like, it's just a solid ship. And being someone who's been playing the game for 8 or 9 years, something like that, I kind of wish we'd see more ships be released that are similar to the design, process or design, element of the USS Montana line. I really like having the game kind of focused on those regards rather than, you get this F key that does this, and it's like cast a spell or whatever you call it nowadays. So, not that I can't say keep it within the realms of reality because that is way gone and that's a stupid argument anyways. But, keep it within the balance because I think the problem with the Montana if there even is one, if you want to call it, isn't that she's a weak battleship. It's just that there's been other battleships that have been released, here over the last 3-4 years that are just they're flat out better, and they must be bouncing on a whole different scale, because where we started to where we are now, it's very different. It's completely different. So what's the standard? What are we like? What do we consider balanced? If we just balance around population numbers about how popular the ship is, of course the Montana and the Yamato are never going to get buffed, right? But if we actually look at how the ships are playing, and are they fun to play? Are they a chore? How are they stacking up against what we've released? This thing takes a decent amount of skill to know the ships you can overmatch, know where to shoot on specific ships. You don't get the 30mm auto ricochets and whatever. Like knowing who has that improved side plate and that can angle to your 406s, like the Stalingrad, as you will see. It's hard, but I like giving cruisers the ability to have ability to play defense and play against you, right? Which is a big gripe of mine. I think that a lot of, nowadays, especially, it's just like you just click them and you're guaranteed 10 to 15k damage on cruisers. And that's like, well, no wonder why no one's playing cruisers, and no wonder why we have an abundance of super healing cruisers or abundance of smoke firing cruisers. And no wonder why cruiser players hide behind islands, because they can't engage with, open water kite. That's hard unless you have a speed boost or something else. So it's just one of those things. It's just where the game has kind of gone, and you have to adapt to the circumstances of the different kind of ship. So the best thing that I can tell you is understand who you're fighting and know what makes your ship strong. This ship's artillery feels comfortable to me. I've played with it for years. As you can see, again, this is not a phenomenal game, but I think it highlights a good idea about how to play her, which is always great. That it does take a commander who understands the game to a little bit more than not to understand how to get the most out of her. So but yeah, so anyways, just to sum it all up, the things that I recommend with her is, number one is positioning. You have to understand where you're going to go, and of course the enemies that you're fighting. So please read the opening screen and the battle lineup screen. It's the most important thing, and have a plan where to go to. 2, you don't always have to show full broadside to get a full salvo off. There are times and places you got to pick your spots. There are times that you can just fire your front 2 guns, and I'm telling you, because of that improved artillery plotting room 2, you're going to get good results out of your artillery as well. And the third one, you are not a brawler. Don't attempt to brawl. If anything, I consider you a very good support battleship. You're going to be able to support your allies as we've crossed this whole line, and basically help take fire off them if they're going to be shooting you. That's your main job, is to support with our supporting fire and tank as much as you possibly can. So again, when that improved heal, it's going to allow you to be way more tanky than you've ever been able to. So utilize it, guys. Utilize it. And that goes down the entire line. You start off with the slow dreadnoughty kind of battleships until you get to around tier 8. It is a bit of a grind in regards of like a mental grind. But once you get to 8, 9, and 10, especially 10 here, it is super rewarding. I love these battleships entirely. I keep them close to heart here. I'm sure most of the community does as well. I would like to see them help them out in like the Montana, what I said with the Montana. But again, I'm not holding my breath on anything. So pretty good, pretty decent game. Pretty achievable by the most of you guys, right? Nothing too special here. So hopefully this video helps you guys. And I will catch you all in the next video. Peace out.